So I want to talk a bit about how to read and understand the tempo of fights when they aren't immediately won off the first engage. What's the kind of default flow of these extended fights, and what should we look out for when watching them? The first thing to understand is that in most situations, both teams are ideally looking to initiate fights themselves. I'll talk about this more in depth in other videos, but basically setting up and opening the fight first gives you more control over factors like where the fight is and who is the main target, but more importantly, allows the aggressing team to use their ults and resources to try and kill things, whereas the team being aggressed on has to use their resources to stay alive, and so doesn't have as many opportunities to get kills. However, for teams to initiate that fight and have it be successful, they first need a good solution. The solution can come in a few different ways, but it's usually a mix between the ultimate situation, the positions the players are in, and of course the comp matchup. For ults, it's quite simple. You're looking to use any ult as an opener that lets you aggress and initiate the fight. Pharah comps might open the fight with Nano, Rein comps might use a speed boost High Noon, that type of thing. The positioning part of it is mostly about staging. Is the team in a position where they can engage and hit the enemy from multiple angles? Is the team close enough that they can rush in together before their target can escape? You could imagine a dive team on defense. If they're playing close positions and can see the enemy Ana come through the choke, they know they have a solution based on their positions and can dive in to initiate the fight. Obviously the team comp matchup factors into this a lot, but it's more that it decides what ultimates and what positions you need before you take that engage. Just because a Rein comp spends 30 seconds hiding on point getting spammed by a Pharah comp, it doesn't mean that both these teams aren't looking to initiate. Both teams want to aggress and commit to a fight on their terms. It's just that in those long extended pre-fights before anyone engages, neither team has a solution based on their ultimates and positions just yet. So typically the team that sets up and initiates first has the advantage, because they have the first opportunity to get kills and get to force the enemy to use resources defensively. Initiating fights also means the aggressing team can be selective about how heavily they commit. You can imagine a team defending Anubis A. They might initiate a fight in the main choke, throw in some resources and maybe an ult, and if it gets value they can hard commit and clean up. But if it doesn't get value, maybe the enemy team kite out or commit a load of ults to hold their ground, then that aggressing team can just back out and stabilize, ready to go again. So if a fight doesn't get decided by that first engage, what's the type of flow that we're looking for? Well, we know that although both teams are usually looking to initiate, one team will find a solution faster and then start the fight first. Sometimes teams will trade on each other at exactly the same time, but that's usually at the start of control maps when no one has any ults. Once the ult economy starts rolling, most fights start with one team aggressing and one team being aggressed on. The team that's aggressing will concentrate their resources, usually by using those opening ultimates, and then they'll use that uptime to try and kill the enemy team, or at least clear them out of their positions so they can get an advantage in map control. During that time, it's up to the team that's being aggressed on whether they want to match the aggressing team and fight, or whether they want to try and kite it out. Again, the answer to this question depends on the ults, the positions, and the comp matchup. Usually this answer will be no, because if the aggressing team actually sets up a decent solution, they should be able to commit to their play with more resources than the other team can match them with, so it will be safer for them to back up and not take the fight. Sometimes, however, teams will want to match the aggression, and we can see that in this fight here. Fusion are in the middle of swapping their comp, so it is a bit weird, but they have strong brawl potential with the Coalescence, so they're going to try and jump across to Chengdu's high ground and aggress onto them. However, Chengdu have strong positions and also have a very strong brawl potential from their backline heroes, especially since they have the rally. So when Fusion go for their engage, Chengdu make the decision to match them. Typically though, teams won't look to immediately match like this, as theoretically it's the moment when the aggressing team is at its strongest. So if a team is backing up or not peaking their angles when they get aggressed on, it means they're trading time, space control, and maybe a bit of capture percentage for those ults and resources that the enemy team are using during that initiation. Then critically, once those enemy resources start to time out, they'll look to counterpush and use their own ults and resources to retake that space or repeak those angles. You can think of this kinda like those Rein vs Rein matchups, where one team might initiate with a sound barrier, the other team doesn't want to fight a sound barrier and so backs out, then once that sound barrier starts to time out, that team will re-engage with something like D.Va Bomb. It's the same concept, just upscaled to fit a team comp that isn't playing together as 6. To analyze the flow of these types of fights, we can ask two main questions to each team. First, how many resources does it cost the aggressing team to take that control? Are they using 3 or 4 ultimates? Are they bleeding picks while doing it? That sort of thing. Same question on the other side. How costly do they make it for the aggressing team to take that control? Second question, How well did the aggressing team set up after that uptime to punish the enemy's attempt at retaking control? Do they take the best positions? Are they ready for the ults the enemy will use on the retake, and so on? Then, on the other side, how coordinated is that attempt at the retake? Timings, targets, or whatever. So let's talk through a couple of examples. Here again we have Philly versus Chengdu on Volskaya. Chengdu have just capped first point and were able to take some positions on point B before Philly could set up properly. Critically, Jinmu is able to take control of the Mega, the backline is able to set up on high ground without using any resources, and Gaga is able to get to point without taking damage. Ultimate-wise, Hunters are favoured because they have Mines, Valk, and almost EMP, but Fusion should be able to build pretty much everything but rally pretty fast. I'll talk about the ideal theoretical situation first, then we'll watch through and ask those questions we just talked about. So, because of the positions and ultimates, Hunters are ready to start a fight, but because of the team comps and the positions Philly are playing, there isn't a clear target for Chengdu to engage on. So instead, they'll want to use their resources to clear some space that'll let them start forcing the objective and take strong positions. And we can imagine how Chengdu's ults enable them to do this. The Hammond Mines can be used to help Gaga clear the space on point, while at the same time, Valkyrie can be used as a damage boost that lets Chengdu's backline clear Philly's ranged heroes off of their positions and make them hide. Once those heroes are hiding, Chengdu is then free to take more aggressive positions that they can use to help Gaga cap the point, as well as punish Philly's attempts at retaking the space or repeaking any angles. Since Philly don't have the positions or ults to match this aggression, we expect them mostly to chill out and stabilize. They'll keep a bit of pressure on Hunters so that they're able to build their ults, but they shouldn't take any major risks until they have their own solution. Their solution being the whole team bursting out and repeaking their angles using their ults once they've built them, which should also be around the same time that Chengdu's Mines and Valkyrie are starting to run out. At that point, a few things could happen. If Chengdu play well, they'll be ready with their EMP to immediately deny Philly's retake ultimates, and they'll be set up in such strong positions that Philly can't deal with them without getting punished. And if Philly play well, they'll burst out as 6 using their ults and catch someone on Chengdu, or at least put so much pressure on that Chengdu have to disengage. They should also be aware of Jinmu's EMP and be ready to counter it with Alarm's Transcendence. If both teams play it well, we're mostly relying on strong mechanical play and perfect timings to decide the fight. And now if we watch the whole thing through, we can see this is kinda what happens, except nowhere near as clean. Gaga goes to contest point with Mines and overcommits. Nisha's Valk is maybe a little late, but it still allows them to clear the angles and start the contest. Philly then lose Toby when they should be stabilizing, and have a relatively uncoordinated recontest that Jinmu punishes with EMP, meaning Philly's attempt at a retake turns into more of a stagger. So let's look through it and ask those questions to get a better idea of what happened and what each team could do better. So the first question is for Chengdu, how well do they aggress and take the space? I think the Valkyrie could come out a bit earlier, to quickly force Hopper to hide, while allowing Elsa and Leave to drop and assist Gaga on the point. Gaga is also overcommitting a little bit here. He should probably stay in ball form to contest, then as soon as he knows Philly is backing up to focus him, he can still get back to safety before he dies. But he probably would have been fine as long as the timings between Gaga contesting and the backline pushing with Valk were matched a bit better. All in all, it's a relatively cheap taking of space. They only really spend Mines, Res, and the Valk, which is still active. And for that cost, they get point control and a chance to take a very strong setup versus Philly's recontest. Then we can flip that question round and ask Philly, how many resources did they force Chengdu to use? Obviously, they didn't have too much of a chance because they didn't have ults and weren't able to position at the start of the fight, but they did get a nice collapse onto Gaga to force the res, which might have also forced the Valk. But I also think that earlier on, they could have denied Jinmu hacking the Mega, and then after that, Alarm and Rascal still had a chance to drop together and force Jinmu to translocate out. Could be a bit risky for Alarm since it's difficult to get back on the high ground, but Philly miss a good opportunity here to seize control of the tempo. Trading Mines, Res and Valk for all that map control is pretty cheap for Chengdu. Philly forcing Sombra out as well would give them a lot more options later on. For the second question, we'll start with Philly. How coordinated is their attempt at retaking control? We have a few issues here, so let's go player by player. First we have Toby, who drops onto Elsa super early and gets blown up. Not much point speculating why, but it's really not ideal when all Philly want to do is chill for literally just a couple more seconds until their ults are online. Then we have Mano, who is desperately trying to build his ult. It's understandable that he wants his Mines for the recontest, but he can't afford to waste all his health just a few seconds before the critical moment. Because he feels the pressure to spam for his ult, instead of chilling until Hotba is ready with the Flux, he's unable to even join the retake and instead just staggers in later on. Then we have the Hotba and Alarm duo. Both of them are doing well, farming their ults ready for the retake, but when the moment comes, Hotba gets EMP'd and killed before Alarm can save him with Trance. And this really is kind of fine. Hotba could have maybe ulted from a safer position, stayed inside or gone around the back, and maybe Alarm could have expected Hotba to kite back and Trance this way instead. But I don't really care about their micro too much. The Flux getting cancelled by EMP is expected. The main thing that kills Hotba is that his Brig is already dead and unable to heal him, and also that his Wrecking Ball didn't engage when he pushed out with Flux. If Mano had saved his health and been able to go in, Chengdu wouldn't have been able to focus fire Hotba so easily, and he probably would have been saved by Alarm. Then finally we have the DPS. Carpe is doing a decent job here, spamming and building Bob without taking risks, waiting for the team to recontest with the ults. Not really a whole lot to say here in terms of the fight tempo, since he never gets the chance to take an aggressive peek because of the rest of the team's mistakes. Rascal is doing well too, he helps the team clear Gaga off point, goes for the head-on pulse bomb, which isn't too bad since he was already chasing Gaga and saw the opportunity. Then he chills out but keeps some pressure on while waiting for the recontest, before finally hitting his flank at basically the same time that Hotba starts the recontest with the Flux. Maybe he could have saved his pulse, maybe he could have hit this one clip on leave, but timings-wise, both DPS did fine on the retake. And for our last question, how well did Chengdu set up to stop the enemy retaking that control? Obviously, we've just seen it from Philly's POV, Chengdu have a very strong setup. The backline positions and spacing are great. They are locking down all the angles, and the space between these backline heroes means they won't all get caught if Philly try to go in on them. Plus, Monk is still on high ground, so it's tough for Tracer to reach him. Moving on, we see Jimmu instantly respond with EMP to cancel the Flux and hold the space. Once Hotba dies, it's kind of doomed for Philly, but we still see nice secure play from Hunters. Gaga's contesting Carpe, Elsa's not getting caught by the Hammond Mines, and so on. And because they had this strong setup, they caught Philly's re-engage very easily and turned it into a stagger. Obviously, we just talked a lot about what happened individually, so I'm going to show the whole fight through from above, and you can see how quickly this all actually happens. But if you're thinking about that flow, thinking about the engages and the re-engages, you can really get a feel for the tempo these teams are trying to hit. You can see this flow to some extent in the majority of teamfights, and it's another aspect of that uptime downtime playstyle that we've talked about in the last few videos. To finish it off with a final quick example, here we can see Philly initiating a fight onto Chengdu by positioning close to their target and then bursting out with Nano. This fight also follows that engage, disengage, then re-engage flow, but it happens almost instantly. The reason it happens so fast is because unlike the Volskaya example, the aggressing team never had a strong solution to begin with. This is because Hunters once again have a very strong defensive setup, Gaga's ready to slam whoever pushes, Elsa is far back enough that he can dodge the flashbang, then Monk and Leave are both in strong positions where they can lock down their angles safely, and the whole time, Jinmu is scouting and giving his team info on the timings. And although it happens super fast, we can see Chengdu kite back initially, then stabilize and re-engage to punish Fusion's play. So depending on how strong that initial solution is, we might see very obvious disengages like in that first example, or super quick disengages like this one that you almost can't see, where a team leans back and pauses for just a fraction of a second to figure out the enemy play before leaning forward again to punish it. Pretty much every fight that isn't decided in the first cooldown trade will follow this type of flow. It takes a lot of coordination to consistently do well in these situations, but the teams that can handle it will dominate, so it is a good one to look out for.